King Solomon received over $1 billion worth of gold every single year during his reign. That's not an exaggeration. According to 1 Kings 10 verse 14, he collected 666 talents of gold annually, which translates to roughly $1.1 billion in modern currency. But here's what nobody talks about. Solomon didn't inherit this wealth. He didn't win a cosmic lottery. He built a $2 trillion fortune from scratch using 10 specific principles that still work today. And Wall Street executives are paying consultants $50,000 per session to learn the exact same strategies that Solomon wrote down for free in the book of Proverbs. They just don't call it biblical wisdom. They call it wealth management. So here's my question for you. If the richest man in human history left you a detailed financial blueprint, why would you ignore it? Over the next few minutes, you're going to discover 10 wealth lessons from King Solomon that are so powerful, so proven, and so practical that applying even one of them will transform your financial future. But first, I need you to smash that subscribe button for Biblical Wealth, because what you're about to learn could be the difference between dying broke and building generational prosperity. Lesson number 1, seek wisdom before wealth. Most people have this completely backwards. They chase money first and hope wisdom comes later. Solomon did the opposite, and that decision made all the difference. When God appeared to him in a dream and offered him anything he wanted, Solomon didn't ask for gold. He didn't ask for land. He didn't ask for power. 1 Kings chapter 3 verse 9 records that Solomon asked for a discerning heart to govern God's people wisely. Think about that for a second. He was given a blank check from the creator of the universe, and he requested wisdom. God's response was revolutionary. Because Solomon prioritized wisdom over riches, God gave him both. He became not only the wisest person on earth, but also the wealthiest. Here's the principle buried in that story. Money is attracted, not pursued. When you become wise, wealth flows toward you naturally because wise people make better decisions. They see opportunities others miss. They avoid disasters others walk straight into. They multiply resources instead of wasting them. This is why 70% of lottery winners go bankrupt within 5 years. They get money without wisdom, and money without wisdom is a curse disguised as a blessing. Compare that to Warren Buffett, who built $90 billion through decades of disciplined, wise investing. The difference isn't luck, it's wisdom. Solomon proved that wisdom is the foundation of lasting wealth. Everything else you build will crumble without it. So stop praying for more money. Start praying for the wisdom to steward what you already have. Read one chapter of Proverbs every day. Ask yourself before every purchase, is this wisdom or is this waste? When you prioritize wisdom, wealth becomes a natural byproduct. Lesson number 2, work with purpose and diligence. Solomon was brutally honest about laziness. Proverbs 10 verse 4 states that a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Translation? Lazy people stay broke. Hardworking people build wealth. This sounds obvious until you realize how many people are waiting for their big break instead of working toward it. They want to get rich quickly. They listen to gurus promising overnight success. They chase shortcuts and schemes instead of putting in consistent effort at their actual jobs. Solomon saw this pattern thousands of years ago, and he warned against it repeatedly. You cannot save or invest money you haven't earned. Before wealth accumulation comes income generation. And income generation requires diligent work, not sporadic effort, not half-hearted attempts. Diligent, focused, purposeful work over time. The modern temptation is to reject this. We want passive income. We want automated systems. We want money while we sleep. Those things are fine as goals, but they require diligent work to establish first. Solomon understood that wealth isn't built through wishful thinking. It's built through disciplined labor applied consistently over years. Every successful person you admire worked harder than you realized during the years nobody was watching. That's the part Instagram doesn't show you. The late nights, the rejected proposals, the failed attempts, the unglamorous grind that eventually compounds into extraordinary results. Solomon himself didn't just sit on a throne counting gold. He oversaw massive construction projects. He managed international trade routes. He negotiated complex diplomatic agreements. His wealth came through strategic, diligent work applied with wisdom. If you want different financial results, you need different work habits. Stop looking for the easy path. Start building something valuable through sustained effort. Lesson number 3, save aggressively and spend wisely. Solomon pointed to an ant as a financial teacher. Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 through 8 tell us to observe the ant, which works hard all summer, storing food for winter without needing supervision. God created this tiny creature to teach you a critical lesson about saving. The ant doesn't consume everything it gathers. It stores surplus for future needs. That's not optional financial advice. That's a commandment embedded in creation itself. Most people fail financially because they spend everything they earn. They see money, they spend money, then they wonder why they're always broke. Solomon identified this pattern clearly. Proverbs 21 verse 20 says, "There is precious treasure in the house of the wise, but a foolish man swallows it up and wastes it." Notice the contrast. Wise people accumulate resources, foolish people consume them. The difference isn't income level. Plenty of high earners die broke because they spent faster than they earned. The difference is discipline. Here's where Solomon's wisdom gets even deeper. He distinguishes between owning luxuries and consuming them. Wise people may have expensive items in their homes, but they don't deplete their savings to acquire them. They build wealth first, then enjoy luxuries from the overflow. Foolish people do the opposite. They finance lifestyles they can't afford, draining resources to maintain appearances. This creates a poverty trap disguised as success. You look rich while going broke. Solomon saw through this deception. He understood that real wealth isn't about what you display. It's about what you've preserved. The question you need to answer honestly is simple. Are you a spendthrift? Because if you are, you cannot prosper. It's not the high cost of living destroying your finances. It's the cost of high living. Stop spending beyond your income. Start saving aggressively. Build reserves that create options and opportunities. That's how you position yourself for the next 3 lessons that will completely transform how you think about money, risk, and financial freedom. Lesson number 4, diversify like your survival depends on it. Ecclesiastes 11 verse 2 contains investment advice that modern portfolio managers charge thousands to teach. Divide your portion into 7 or 8 parts because you don't know what disaster might happen. Solomon understood risk management 3,000 years before Wall Street existed. He's telling you to spread your resources across multiple investments because catastrophe is unpredictable. This isn't about being cautious. This is about being strategic. Consider what happens when you concentrate everything into one opportunity. You find a stock you love. The company looks solid. The growth potential seems unlimited. So you dump your entire savings into it. Then the CEO gets indicted. The industry collapses. Technology changes. Suddenly, you're wiped out completely. Solomon saw this pattern repeatedly. He watched people build everything on single foundations that crumbled overnight. The solution isn't avoiding investment. The solution is intelligent distribution. 7 or 8 portions represents meaningful diversification without dilution. Too few investments, and you're vulnerable to disaster. Too many and individual successes become meaningless. If you split resources across 200 tiny positions, even a 10 times return on one barely moves your total wealth. But 7 or 8 substantial positions creates balance. One performs exceptionally well and your portfolio grows significantly. One fails completely and you survive because 6 others remain intact. This principle applies beyond stocks and bonds. Diversify your income sources. Don't depend solely on one employer or one client. Develop multiple revenue streams that protect you when circumstances shift. Diversify your skills. Don't become so specialized that industry changes make you obsolete. Build capabilities across related domains that create options. Diversify your relationships. Don't rely on one person or one network for all opportunities. Solomon himself demonstrated this perfectly. He generated wealth through international trade, tribute from other nations, gifts from visiting dignitaries, and consulting fees from rulers seeking wisdom. When one source diminished, others compensated. That's financial resilience built on diversification. Stop putting all your eggs in one basket because you genuinely don't know what disaster tomorrow holds. Lesson number 5. Debt is slavery wearing a business suit. Proverbs 22 verse 7 states plainly that the borrower becomes servant to the lender. In Solomon's time, this wasn't metaphorical. Debtors literally became slaves when they couldn't repay. The lender owned their labor until the obligation was satisfied. Modern bankruptcy laws prevent that extreme outcome, but the principle remains devastatingly accurate. Debt claims your future income before you earn it. Every dollar you borrow is a dollar you must repay plus interest. That creates obligations that restrict your freedom to make choices. You can't leave the job you hate because you need the paycheck to cover loan payments. You can't invest in opportunities because available cash goes toward servicing debt. You can't help others generously because creditors get paid first. The borrower truly serves the lender. Financial decisions revolve around satisfying obligations rather than pursuing possibilities. Solomon recognized that true wealth includes autonomy, the ability to direct resources according to your values and vision rather than contractual requirements. Debt destroys that autonomy systematically. Here's what most people miss about debt. It doesn't just cost you the interest rate on paper. It costs you opportunity. Money sent to creditors can't be invested in assets that appreciate. It can't fund business ventures that generate returns. It can't create margin for strategic risks. The real cost of debt is everything you can't do while you're paying it back. Some argue that certain debt is productive. Mortgages build equity. Student loans increase earning potential. Business loans fund growth. Solomon doesn't prohibit all borrowing, but he warns about the relationship it creates. Even productive debt makes you servant to the lender until it's repaid. The question becomes whether that servitude is worth the benefit. Sometimes, yes. A mortgage that costs less than rent while building equity makes mathematical sense. But consumer debt for lifestyle purchases? That's voluntary slavery with zero upside. You're trading future freedom for present consumption. Credit card balances for vacations you can't afford. Car loans for vehicles beyond your means. Furniture financing because you want it now instead of saving first. Every swipe creates another claim on your future earnings. Another obligation that must be satisfied before you can truly prosper. Solomon's instruction is clear. Avoid debt whenever possible. When you must borrow, repay it aggressively. Don't normalize perpetual payments as just how life works. Servitude isn't normal. Freedom is, which leads directly to the next principle that separates those who build lasting wealth from those who just survive financially. Lesson number 6. Seek counsel or pay the price of ignorance. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, repeatedly emphasized getting advice before making major decisions. Proverbs 15 verse 22 tells us that plans fail when there's no counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. Think about that irony. The person with supernatural wisdom from God himself insisted on seeking input from others. If Solomon needed counsel, what makes you think you don't? Pride convinces us we can figure everything out independently. We research online, we read articles, we feel informed enough to proceed. Then we make costly mistakes that experienced advisors would have prevented immediately. The issue isn't intelligence. The issue is perspective. You can't see your own blind spots. You can't objectively evaluate decisions that involve your emotions and desires. You need outside voices who aren't invested in the outcome to ask questions you haven't considered. This applies especially to financial decisions. Before buying your first house, talk to people who've been through the process multiple times. They'll warn you about costs you didn't budget for, neighborhoods that look great but have hidden issues, timing considerations that affect your negotiating position. Before starting a business, consult with entrepreneurs who've built successful companies. They'll identify risks in your plan that seemed invisible to you, market realities you haven't researched, financial projections that don't account for reality. Before making major investments, speak with people who understand markets beyond surface level knowledge. They'll explain why certain opportunities that promise guaranteed returns are actually sophisticated frauds. Why timing matters as much as selection. Why your risk tolerance needs honest assessment. Solomon knew something else about seeking counsel. It protects you from scams. Bernie Madoff stole $50 billion from people who should have known better. How? They didn't ask critical questions. They didn't seek independent verification. They trusted without testing. Solomon understood that fraudsters and con artists have existed throughout history. The schemes change, but the psychology remains consistent. They promise extraordinary returns with minimal risk. They create urgency so you don't have time to think carefully. They isolate you from advisors who might expose the deception. Getting counsel disrupts that process. When you bring proposed deals to knowledgeable people, they spot red flags you missed. They ask uncomfortable questions that reveal problems. They provide protection through perspective. Here's the critical question. Do you have people in your life right now who can speak truth to you about financial decisions? Not yes men who tell you what you want to hear, not people impressed by your ideas, advisors who ask hard questions and point out flaws. If you don't, that's a vulnerability that will eventually cost you. Find mentors. Build relationships with people whose financial track record you respect. Create accountability structures where major decisions get vetted before implementation. The price of good counsel is always less than the cost of expensive mistakes. Lesson number 7, generosity unlocks supernatural multiplication. This principle contradicts everything natural logic tells you about wealth building. Proverbs 11 verses 24 through 25 state that one gives freely yet grows richer, while another withholds what should be given and only suffers want. Whoever brings blessing will be enriched, and one who waters will himself be watered. How does giving lead to increased wealth? It defies mathematical sense. You start with $100, you give away 10. You should have 90 left. Basic arithmetic. Except Solomon observed something that transcends arithmetic. Generosity activates spiritual laws that operate beyond natural calculation. When you give, you position yourself under divine blessing that multiplies what remains beyond what you sacrificed. This isn't about manipulation. You can't give in order to get and expect this principle to work. God sees motives. Calculated generosity designed to trigger return violates the entire spirit of the teaching. True generosity flows from gratitude and compassion, from recognition that everything you have came from God and belongs ultimately to Him, from desire to bless others the way you've been blessed. When that's your heart, supernatural multiplication follows. Scientists have discovered neural links between generosity and happiness. Studies show that generous people experience lower blood pressure, improved mood, and higher self-esteem. There are physical benefits to giving beyond the spiritual ones. But Solomon understood something deeper. Generosity prevents the love of money from taking root in your heart. Ecclesiastes 5 verse 10 warns that whoever loves money never has enough. The pursuit becomes insatiable. There's always one more deal, one more zero in the account, one more acquisition. Money becomes the master instead of the tool. Giving breaks that cycle. When you regularly release resources to bless others, you maintain proper perspective about wealth's purpose. You remember it's a tool for kingdom impact rather than a trophy for personal status. Generosity also creates relational capital that opens unexpected doors. People want to partner with generous individuals. They trust them more. They refer opportunities to them. They go out of their way to help them succeed. Hoarding creates isolation. Generosity creates connection. Which environment produces more opportunities for growth? Start practicing generosity immediately. Not after you get rich. Not when you feel comfortable. Now, give to your church. Support missionaries. Help people in genuine need. Invest in kingdom work that advances the gospel. Watch what God does with the remaining 90%. You'll discover it goes further than the original 100 ever could have. Lesson number 8, money reveals what wisdom conceals. Solomon's later life provides sobering warnings about wealth's corrupting potential. He started with pure devotion. He built the temple with excellence and dedication. 1 Kings records his passionate prayer at the temple dedication, but gradually his priorities shifted. The Queen of Sheba and foreign visitors expressed amazement at his buildings and wealth. They said little about his righteousness or wisdom, just his impressive achievements. Solomon grew hungry for human applause. He constructed grander structures. He increased taxation to fund his projects. He forced labor on his people to complete massive building campaigns. The man who started seeking God's wisdom ended seeking men's admiration. His wealth, instead of being stewarded for God's glory and people's good, became a monument to his own greatness. The kingdom eventually split because of resentment over his oppressive financial policies. Here's what Solomon learned too late. Ecclesiastes 5 verse 10 declares that whoever loves money never has enough. The pursuit of wealth for its own sake creates a void that more wealth can never fill. True satisfaction only comes from God, not from your bank balance, your property portfolio, or your investment returns. Money makes a terrible master, but an excellent servant. When you serve money, it consumes you. When money serves you, it accomplishes kingdom purposes. Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes that he surveyed all his hands had done and everything he'd toiled to achieve. Everything was meaningless, chasing after wind. He concluded that the only thing that matters is fearing God and keeping his commandments. That's the foundation. That's the purpose. That's what outlasts your earthly existence. Your legacy won't be the assets you leave behind. Your legacy will be the lives you influenced and the kingdom impact you created. How did you use your resources? Did they advance God's purposes or just your comfort? Did they bless others or just impress them? Did they create generational transformation or temporary satisfaction? These 8 lessons from Solomon aren't theoretical concepts for academic discussion. They're battle-tested principles from the wealthiest man in history who learned both the power and the peril of money. Work diligently in your calling. Save consistently and avoid consumption traps. Diversify your investments wisely. Escape debt's slavery. Seek counsel before major decisions. Practice radical generosity. Remember that money is a tool for kingdom purposes, not a trophy for personal glory. That's how you build wealth that honors God and blesses generations. Now you understand why Solomon's wisdom remains relevant 3,000 years later. Here's what separates those who just know Solomon's principles from those who actually build wealth with them. Knowledge without application changes nothing. You can memorize every proverb, quote every verse, and still die broke if you never implement what you've learned. Solomon didn't become the richest man in history by collecting wisdom. He became wealthy by applying it relentlessly in every financial decision he made. So the question isn't whether these principles work. History proves they do. The question is whether you'll actually use them starting today. Will you prioritize wisdom over quick money? Will you work diligently instead of chasing shortcuts? Will you save aggressively while others consume everything? Will you diversify strategically? Will you eliminate debt? Will you seek counsel before major moves? Will you give generously even when it feels counterintuitive? Will you keep money as your servant rather than becoming its slave? Your financial future depends entirely on how you answer those questions through your actions over the next decade. If this transformed how you view wealth, hit that like button right now and subscribe to Biblical Wealth so you never miss biblical wisdom that builds generational prosperity. Share this with someone drowning in debt who needs to hear Solomon's truth. Your next financial decision determines your trajectory. Choose wisdom.